Hi folks, welcome to Time to Talk with Sara Muncke. I've just had such a great chat to Sara about all things to do with rescue and rescue dogs. I've known Sara for a little while now. I met her 2008. She's the manager of Chilterns Dog Rescue Society and she runs that. So settle down with a cup of tea, listen to Time to Talk with Sara Muncke and enjoy. Take care, stay safe. Hi Sara, welcome to Time to Talk. I'm so glad to have you on. I've been dying to talk to you actually and talk to you about different rescues. So welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. Very honoured. Thank you.
Yay. And Sara, before we get into rescues, can I just ask you why dogs? Why not cats? Why dogs? What was the interest?
It could have been cats, it could have been guinea pigs, it could have been llamas, it could have been absolutely anything that came my way. It just happened to be dogs, to be honest. I think it all started like way back when, because my mum was very animal deprived as a child. So as soon as she got a place where we could have animals, we always had them. So anything that was away for a stray or didn't quite fit in or had a tough time, or a lot of dogs, they came our way, and so we just grew up with them, and it was always like our responsibility to make sure they were well cared for. You know, she didn't do it, we went out, we lugged the water, carted the hay, mended the fences, sorted out the vets, and so it was just a huge part of our lives forever, really.
Brilliant. So when did you get your first dog?
I was seven. She wanted one before then, but she'd got sort of co-opted into a sort of a local group of ladies who were rescuing dogs, were stray dogs that would have been put down after 7 days. Uh-huh. And one of them was this little sort of Cairn Collie Cross puppy. So that was the first one that my dad let in. He was always a bit more cautious because he knew it was the thin end of the wedge, and he was absolutely totally right. So we had Lucy when she was about 9 weeks old. And we had her right to the end of her life. She was wonderful. Had her puppies and her grandchildren and all sorts. So yeah.
Wow. And have you kept the terrier crosses, or is it just whatever
No, it's whatever. I mean, along the way, personally, I'm a collie person. I have had lots of collies, but shepherd crosses, 3 English Springers, Dachshunds, Lurchers, Terriers got a Chihuahua at the moment because no one else wanted him. So it's kind of what sort of turned up, really. And literally, it did turn up. We had a Jack Russell that just walked into our house on Christmas Day once and stayed. That was it. Don't know where it came from. No one claimed it, so it stayed.
I had that once here. Not long after we moved into this house, I walked in the kitchen. There was a dog standing in the middle of the kitchen growling at me, and it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it happened. They know where to come. So
yeah, we didn't keep it.
Yeah, we had cats. We had, I think, when we were children. I've got a younger brother and sister. We were featured in the local paper as the family, the children that had 120 animals or something. So they came and did all these sort of pictures of us with whatever we had, and a chicken with a tame bantam that used to come in the house and travel around in the car. And I was furious because they'd attributed all these quotes to me that I was supposed to have said, and they were really sort of twee, and there were things I never would have said. And I go, no, I didn't say that, but they were out there, and the pictures were good anyway. So.
Yeah, the press are really funny, aren't they? You have to be careful. Like, I remember doing an interview for the Daily Mail years ago, and there was, there's a couple of things like keep a dog, treat a dog like a dog and treat them mean and keep them keen. And it's like, I never said that.
Yeah.
I won't have anything to do with the standard press. If I can't write it myself, it ain't going in.
No, I think that's probably the best way forward these days. Yeah.
They just change everything. So was it always rescues that you had? Was it always everybody's cast off, so to speak?
Yes. I bought one dog once ever, but all the rest have been rescues, and generally they were the ones that were perhaps not so user-friendly for other people, but we were very lucky because we got a bit of space behind the house, and I suppose because we had a community of animals, they just sort of fitted in, and they kind of, those ones that were a bit traumatised or hurt or whatever, they just kind of picked up the vibe, and in the end they were okay, or we accommodated to them, and we learned, you know, we did get bitten lots, you know, but we said, you know, this dog's got food aggression, don't go near its dinner. But when my brother fell in its dinner, he got what was coming to him, really. So that was, we learned, you know, what were the triggers, what to do, how to work around it, how to resolve it. And then some of those dogs we had to the end of their lives, some were just sort of fosters, some we, you know, we rehabilitated and sort of honed, and it was just a thread that ran right through my childhood and teenage years, really.
And I think, like for me, you've just hit the nail on the head. The dogs are the greatest teachers of all, and observing them and watching them, and yet every dog, although they've all got the instinctive behaviour, they do behave slightly differently depending on their backstory as well, don't they?
Because you just think you've got to hang on one particular situation or behaviour, and the next dog will prove you totally wrong because it doesn't work for them for whatever reason. And so you learn to just, I think you absorb all that body language and their look and the way they move and how they're responding, and it just becomes part of you. So hopefully you don't repeat the same mistake again, and you can see what's going to move them forward.
Yeah, so you know, it happened with that dog, so let's not do it next time. Can I just ask before we get deeper into rescue, because I've noticed that in the dog training world we're getting more and more science based.
Yeah.
And your face said what I'm thinking, actually. I know. So for me, the dog is the greatest teacher, and because it's a sentient being, it's not completely repeatable in the way that lots of science is. You know, to prove something in science, it has to be repeatable by more than so many people, I think, and the theories are there to be disproved. And what I'm finding at the minute, certainly on social media, is there's a lot of like sciencey stuff, and all you get at the minute, as soon as you say something, it's like, give me the scientific proof, give me the scientific evidence.
I think that's really detrimental in many ways to dogs and to the dog world. I mean, obviously it's nice to sort of have information and new information, but fundamentally dogs have not changed, you know. And although there's, you know, having been around for a number of years, you see sort of cycles and things, not only in breeds and preferences, but in training and behaviour and ethos, and yet the dogs are still the same. And it's no good saying, well, this is how it should be, if it isn't working for the dogs. And there's generations of people who are fed this information, some of which is really brilliant, you know, I'm not knocking all of it, but some of it is disadvantaging them and disadvantaging the dogs, because if that doesn't work, they've got no other strategies to fall back on. They haven't got that practical experience. And if the dogs go, well, look, I'm not an example that fits this, then where do they go? And I also think that, you know, some of the cues that the dogs give, the signs are so subtle that unless you're sort of really in tune with them, most scientists would actually miss those. You could be with a group of dogs who are apparently not doing anything, and yet for you and me, they're doing absolutely everything. There's all these sort of messages and energies and looks and twitches that are going on, and you know, that's the kind of thing that if you're just trying to fill in a tick box, doesn't necessarily work.
Yeah, because there was a thing done at the Dogs Trust, wasn't there? Our males, and it wasn't the behaviourists who did the study.
No.
The behaviourists didn't do the study. There were students doing the study, and it came back that there was no dominance.
No rank at all.
Well, I know. I mean, neutered males on a 15-minute break or whatever it was, were too busy having a pee and smelling than getting a bit of argy-bargy going. But you just think, if 19 neuters males were thrown into a pen with a toy, there would have been a lot of dominance being displayed. There would have been a lot of resource guarding. There would have been so much body language.
They were dogs that knew each other, and I did a response to that, which I don't think was sort of met with open arms. But you can only speak as you find, and I say, if I put 19 neutered males in, you know, there would be something happening. I'm pretty sure of that. So
yeah. I mean, you see it. when you, even in a training class, you know, you've got all the dogs lined up, and there'll be some dogs deferring, there'll be some dogs making their neck a little bit longer, making themselves a little bit more important, raising the tail, turning the tail away, turning their face away. You
just have one dog that sits there that exudes such energy that the rest go, okay, we'll just calm, we're not going to take this on. And you know, it's the dogs, I think, now that people have where they don't have those interactions as puppies and don't learn those cues. They're the ones that tend to get themselves into trouble because they're going out in the park or wherever, go for a walk, and another dog sort of signalling to them, and they're missing that because they've never learned it. So
there's no real guidance by the owners to signal good canine etiquette as well. I can remember there was a dog, one of my friends, her dog had just been at one of these classes where it had been allowed to mob all of the other dogs all of the time, on lead, off lead, and it did it Angus, and I can remember pinning Angus down. And you know, just constantly playing and playing and playing, and Angus was given all of the signals. He turned his head away, tucked his tail, he was patting the chest, everything. And in the end I just hauled this dog off and said, you know, this dog's going to teach my dog to be aggressive because he hasn't been taught good canine etiquette by either the owner or by the other dogs around it.
And I'm bringing it back to sort of rescue briefly. I think that's why so many dogs end up in rescue, because they are ignorant of so much that, you know, even in a sort of whether they're in a sort of a good sort of puppy sort of socialising class or with other dogs or wherever it happens to be, they just don't learn this, and as I say, the owners don't necessarily know what's going wrong.
No. So when did you start working with rescues rather than taking them in?
Right, so during my gap year I volunteered, and so inevitably that ended up with sort of some coming home. Then I went off, did my teacher training, still with dogs in the background. So I taught for a number of years. Then I sort of went to the BBC. In the meantime, had a family, got a mortgage. So it was about the year 2000 that I had the opportunity to sort of jump ship on all those other things and move full time into rescue.
Wow.
Yeah, and then looking at how things were, completely revamping what had been a small charity doing well, and thinking actually small charities doing well don't stay doing well. You've got to move forward, you've got to sort of underpin everything you do, you've got to make it completely transparent, you've got to have funds coming in, you've got to have your profile such that, you know, you can carry on the work that you do and justify those decisions that you make. So with the help of some others, that's what we did. We completely kind of lifted every stone, made sure we were absolutely happy with everything, our paperwork, our philosophy, fundraised, and then eventually sort of bought a property that we have now, which is amazing, and completely built, purpose-built facilities for the dogs. So been there since 2010.
Wow. And I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it.
It's lovely.
I know.
We're very lucky.
You just, the last time I was there, you just got planning permission.
That's right, yeah. Yeah. So we did a puppy class for years on.
We did.
Yeah.
A long time ago. And because I, and even now in Scotland, Chilterns is the only rescue centre that I will recommend people get a dog from. And I had somebody phone me a couple of weeks ago and says, oh, didn't realise they moved to Scotland after another dog looking for a rescue, and I sent her your details down in Marlborough. So even in Scotland, I'm still down there recommending.
Keep it going. I mean, the dogs go all over the country. We're not sort of geographically based. We work on putting dogs first. That's our sort of logo. So if it's right for the dog and it's right for the adopter, then it doesn't really matter where people are. So.
No, I mean, I'm so impressed with what you do, because you focus on the training. It's not. I have worked with rescue centres in the past, very small rescue centres where they've literally taken the dog off the ship from Ireland, off the flight from Ireland, put it without any kind of testing, putting it into a foster home, and then the foster home, then, you know, the people getting bait, they're not necessarily experienced, and not realising that the dog that they put on the ferry is the dog that they're going to get off the ferry because of the experience the dog goes through while it's on there. Whereas I found you and, you know, Belinda and everybody else who was there would spend such a long time getting to know the dogs and really getting to understand their personality and their triggers and their temperament, and doing some training and modifying any behaviour that needed to be done. And for me, I think that is such a massive part of what he's doing.
I don't think we could do it any other way. And it's not only with the dogs, it's with sort of potential adopters as well. So that, you know, we, before any decisions are made, they have sort of a time to familiarise themselves with the dog and get to know it. But even if that's going well, and even if they've had other dogs before, however, even from us, we always go through a sort of a training process with them, because I mean, legally we need to make sure they can cope with their dog, but they need to understand what's going to work with that dog. It may not be the same as the Labrador they had before, or the Shepherd they had before. It will be different, and what's going to get it sort of responding well with them going forward when we pass that responsibility over. So we just to literally take a dog in and put it in a new home it skims the surface of rescue. It sort of can be sort of what's the expression, fire pan into fire, really.
It is, and there's a lot of the big centres, and I'm not going to name them, but I am tempted. I'm not going to. They'll hand the dog over, and then they'll go, "Oh, hang on a sec, that dog needs a muzzle. Let me get their muzzle as well." And I find that quite scary, where they haven't really notified everybody that they need muzzles, or they've handed dogs out without muzzles, and it's not until after the owners have phoned up and said,
from our point of view, if a dog needs a muzzle, then it probably should not be leaving us.
Yeah.
That's where we'd be at, and and that's where we invest so much time with our dogs too. So whatever that situation is, you work with it so that's no longer the case. Obviously we match. We don't choose dogs for people, but we would only introduce dogs if we feel that the sort of dogs they would like, the sort of dogs they would cope with. So they're choosing, it's like blind date, but choosing from the positives, if you like. So that way it means that the dogs aren't bouncing back time after time. Once they go into a home, they will stay in the home, and with a really, really, really low return rate, it means that then we can bring new dogs in. So that's what we find works for us. But and because we're independent, we've got that sort of luxury. We're not trying to replicate a formula across lots and lots of different centres, which I know obviously is a different scenario altogether.
I mean, something I'd never even thought about. I saw an interview that you did, it must have been about 13 years ago, and you talked about how people just drop dogs off.
Yeah.
And I was really shocked by this. Actually, I was really shocked by you haven't done, there'll be a dog there, or people, you literally get inundated at certain times of the year. So can you just tell me a bit about like the whole rescue process, people dropping dogs off, or just...
Yeah, I mean, again, we've had sort of bad times. I mean, because a lot of dogs come in because people's circumstances are difficult. So if during a recession they lose their jobs, lose their houses, they have to take jobs right out of the house, that's going to impact on their dogs. And generally speaking, it tends to be like a wave across the country. So if we're busy, we would anticipate that most of the other centres would also have high numbers of intake inquiries, and maybe would bounce them around different people. So we could have people that perhaps around 30 or 40 different centres to place their dog. Very often they don't get a reply, or there's a sort of a press button 1, press button 2, answer phone type service. We can be the first person they actually speak to. Can pretty much guarantee if they ring us during our opening hours, there will be someone to talk with them in depth about the situation. But we have either people who just drive in because they're living in their car, or there's been a bereavement, or the dog's done something. We try and do it by appointment, but having a structure allows us to be flexible to those emergencies that we do see regularly.
And is there a certain time of year?
Yeah, I'd probably get a sort of...
This year's exceptional.
Yeah, there is. I mean, people think that after Christmas we're going to get... After Christmas, people think, we're going to have loads of puppies after Christmas and it's going to be really busy. In a typical year, which it absolutely isn't, our busiest intake period is from the end of October through to Christmas Eve.
Really?
We keep statistics, and every year without fail, probably we will get anything up to a third of our total intake inquiries within a month leading up to Christmas, which I think...
Wow, so is that You're going to tell me I'm wrong there, but just as soon as he said it, is that because the dogs have hit adolescence of being a real pain in the neck, and there's Christmas coming as well, and they just can't
I
cope?
think dogs that have been out in the garden during the summer, the weather's bad, they've got to come in probably.
Uh-huh.
It's not so much fun going for walks first thing in the morning or last thing at night if you're working. Finances are tight. There's pressures of Christmas, people coming, and it's like a watershed, like get the problem sorted by Christmas. So typically that's when we take a lot in. Post Christmas, a lot will go. And then we'll see the sort of Christmas puppies, they say, sort of around Easter time, when, as you say, they're getting a little bit more of a lesson, the novelty's worn off, the house training's not going quite as well as everyone hoped, they've torn down a few curtains or whatever. And then we'll see another sort of intake, often just before the summer holidays, when people want to go away and they can't take the dog, or friends let them down, or the boarding's too expensive. And we've actually been to the airport to collect dogs from the airport as people are about to board their plane to go on holiday, and they've taken the dog to the airport not knowing what they're going to do with it.
Wow, really?
Amazing, isn't it?
That's unbelievable.
Set off like we've got a last minute deal. Oh, can you come pick up the dog? What are you supposed to do?
Oh man, but then do they come back and say, I'll have my dog back when they come back from holiday?
Well, that didn't actually happen, I have to be honest, but not in the cases that I've dealt with, no. I mean, because when we take the dog in, there's a sort of a legal release form, sort of transferring keepership. So if they had come back, we would have had some fairly serious discussions, but in actual fact, none of the dogs we picked up were reclaimed.
Oh, that I don't laugh or let it cry. That is, I mean, it's funny, but it's also incredibly sad, isn't it?
That's rescue, that you're on a complete roller coaster. Like 1 minute, like it's amazing, it's wonderful, we've done this dog's done this for the first time, these people have been wonderful, and the next minute it's like bang, back down to earth. And so yeah, it's psychologically quite demanding, I think.
You must see the best and the worst of people.
Yes, you do, definitely. And overall, you see more good than bad, but the bads can be pretty bad. But again, I spend a lot of my sort of rescue life saying just because a dog's in rescue doesn't mean it's had a tough time. Don't paint it as a problem dog, or a dog with baggage, or a dog that you've got to compensate for or allow something. That is not the case. For a very large proportion, nothing bad's happened. There's just been a change in circumstances. And even if something bad has happened, why are you going to cast it in that role for the rest of its life when it just wants to move forward and be a dog? So how do you let it move on? What do you need to do? What input does it need to have? And they will transform, absolutely transform.
That's so good. I put a section in the latest Pet Gun Dog. I re-released it, and I put a section on the rescue dog. And I said just that, we most dogs in rescue are in rescue because they're just not wanted anymore, rather than the fact that they've got an issue, or they've been abused, or been badly treated. It's just like the life has changed, and there's just no place for them.
That's right. I mean, particularly at the moment, we've had sort of quite a few dogs that have come in from people who've gone into hospital, and some have passed away or gone into care. And those dogs would have stayed there for their natural lives if things have been different, or people who've taken on dogs with the best intentions and it hasn't worked out. And that's the sort of the wave of dogs I think a lot of rescues are gearing themselves up for now. So many people took on dogs during lockdown that there will be repercussions of some kind at some point. So we're kind of preparing ourselves for that.
Because it started happening, yeah. Because we're still kind of in lockdown, aren't we? We're in limbo at the minute.
Yeah, I think that's reflected in the sort of the calls and the emails we're getting, that people are making tentative inquiries, or we've had sort of assessment appointments booked that haven't been fulfilled but may be at a later date. So there's a little sort of niggle on the line, as it were, rather than a sort of a wave of sort of phone calls to take dogs in yet.
So how long have we been in lockdown? We went in lockdown in March, didn't we? So
yeah.
March, April, May, June, July, August. We've been in 5 months. So if people got their puppies in March, then you're talking a lot of them the early lockdown dogs will be like hitting adolescence. And
Yeah, they will. Yeah, they will. And it's got. I mean, I can see why people would want to have a dog during lockdown, because I mean, my dogs have been my salvation, and we've walked miles and miles and miles more than what we'd normally do. And I think, you know, that there's lots of really positive reasons for having a dog, but it also, from our point of view, seems to have got very competitive, that because friends, neighbours, family have got a puppy, then they should get one, which has sort of pushed the prices up, and people are getting them from perhaps very, well, less than reputable sources, shall we say, and then those bring their own issues. So that takes time to work through, because people are at home at the moment, furloughed, or they're coping. They're coping. But, you know, as we get nearer to sort of the autumn, I think, you know, there's going to be more pressures inevitably.
And then Christmas as well.
And Christmas, yeah.
So are you expecting a bigger turnaround next month? Because you said October is normally the...
Yeah, I would say probably towards the end of October things could get quite hectic. It depends what people want to do. I mean, our worry is that because so many people have paid such exorbitant prices for puppies, wherever they've got them from, will they want to bring their dog to rescue where we can take it on, deal with it sensibly, put it in a home that's going to sort of be right for it, you know, forever, ideally, or are they going to try and recoup their money by selling it on social media, and then it gets moved from home to home to home? Because quite often we track dogs through a variety of different homes. Someone will contact us because something's happening that's not quite right, and then it doesn't come in, and then we hear about the same dog with somebody else, and there's a little bit more of the story comes out, and then it goes to someone else, and there's a bit more of a story, and then finally it goes to someone who either says, I want to break the cycle, will you take it? Or this dog has done something so dreadful that I can't actually place it. So I'm hoping that's not going to happen.
So once someone makes that initial inquiry and want assessment, you then keep half an eye on the dog to see what...
We keep records because people, sounds a bit cynical, but I suppose I am after all these years, people will frame their request for a dog to come in based on who they've talked to. So that, as an example, you know, it might be, I don't know, some sort of mastiff that's been aggressive and done something with the kids and wrecked the house, and we say, well, we'll see it, but it was going to have to go on a waiting list because space in our enhanced care unit is full. And then they forget they've rung you and say, oh, it's a Labrador cross, and he's lovely, he's just a bit over boisterous, and oh, he's not the kiddo, but he's fine, really. And it kind of gets modified. So it's very useful to have a record of sort of the individual information, so you can actually sort of test that. Doesn't mean we won't take the dog in, but it's just useful to have as much information as you can.
It's a bit like the CVs, isn't it? You're applying for this job, so you'll skew it towards like team leading, or if you're applying for an analyst job, you'll skew it towards that kind of thing, isn't it?
Particularly, no, they'll have had input perhaps from other places as well, so they will say the things that they think will get the dog out of the home faster, which is why we like to see as many dogs as possible prior to intake, even if intake is on that day, because, you know, we let the dogs tell us. You know, because sometimes people just don't know.
No.
You know.
And I say that, like the guys in training, I say not everybody lies, they don't mean to, but we have such a selective memory, and we don't necessarily mean to lie, but we don't necessarily remember things as they happened, and then time is a great perception changer, isn't it? You know, and so you have to go in and just let the dog tell the story.
I think then that way you can get the best idea of what's actually happening, and you know, you're in a better position to help, or at least give advice anyway.
So, Sarah, can I ask you about the Romanian dogs or the overseas rescues? Because I mean, you know what I'm like. I'm quite outspoken and quite opinionated. Although softened, I'm not as opinionated as I used to be. But I just think when people are bringing dogs in from abroad, there's a couple of things really for me when I brought my dog back from New Zealand with me, he was a very different dog to the one that I got off. The one that I put on the plane was very different to the dog that I got off the plane. And it really completely affected his temperament and his personality, and he was needier than he used to be, and he wasn't as confident. And he was my dog before I put him on the plane. And so sometimes I think, well, when we bring dogs in from Romania and like I say, or any of these places where there've been street dogs, and then we put them on a plane, or how I don't know how they're brought across the plane or shit. I'm really ignorant to it. I mean, I'll put my hand up and say I am really ignorant to it. And then we'll get them off, and then are we sometimes doing them a disservice bringing them over? Are we going from rescuer to jailer? Because I'm seeing so much at the minute where
it's hard, isn't it? It's a really controversial subject, and everyone's got a different take on it. I mean, I from our point of view, it's something that we looked into a number of years ago, and we do take a few international dogs. Our priority is always sort of our local dogs, and then the dogs from the southeast and even from Wales. But the reason that there are millions upon millions of dogs, street dogs across the world, and recently it's really, as you know, ramped up for sort of Romanian dogs, Bulgarian dogs, these Cypriot dogs, Spanish dogs. I mean, right across sort of the Mediterranean, sort of Eastern Europe. And there is no doubt that these dogs face a horrible end in many cases. I mean, you've only got to sort of Google that, and unless you've got a really strong stomach, I suggest people don't do that, because it is brutal. It is absolutely brutal. So there is a real imperative to get those dogs out. How it's done, if it's done, I think is the topic that should be more widely discussed. I mean, there's an argument, and we hear it regularly, that why are you bringing in international dogs when we've got all these dogs in the UK that need homes? And that's a fair point, except if you go to rescues, a lot of the dogs that are there, particularly the long-term dogs, are not dogs that most people would want to bring into their home. They're looking for the smaller, more attractive dogs, younger dogs, dogs that haven't, you know, got any problems. And in recent years, those sort of dogs, I think, have been in shorter supply for whatever reason, possibly because as a country we've been in a better position until now. With the Romanian dogs, we sort of operated a system whereby we sort of worked through another charity to identify dogs that we feel, as far as we can tell, have the temperament and age, size, type to sit well in the UK home with support. So when they come in, they'll obviously got the inoculated, microchip, they have passports. We start that process again. So we are actively looking for any sort of parasites that are there, which most people don't even know exist, but we've had sort of top advice on various conditions that, you know, do exist and can be potentially passed on to people. So again, any dog that had that problem, you know, we would be aware of it almost immediately. All their inoculations are done again. So again, some people say, well, isn't that sort of too many chemicals? And yes, but then they've got a card. We've got evidence they've been seen by a UK vet at a minimum of twice, and then they go through a period of socialisation, of settling down. 99% of them are brilliant with other dogs because that is their experience, being around other dogs, learning what we were talking about earlier. So they're terribly dog savvy. But you know, a lot of them are nervous of traffic, and that's often because they're the survivors. They've got mums who are sort of road savvy, who kept them away. They have been the puppies that have gone off exploring and been a bit gung-ho and ended up sort of under a lorry or something like that. So it's sort of building that confidence, but also teaching them what they would need to be in a home. They've never been in a home. And it's not a question of they don't know English. They don't know what is expected of them. And where people perhaps sort of see a pretty dog on a Facebook page and they assign their name to that dog and that passport's done in their name, the dog's generally picked up as a service station or from someone's home where there's multiple dogs, that dog has had no transition. It's had no period in which to show its true colours. to have support, to be properly medically assessed. And just hearing from a lady recently, she got one international dog and felt that it needed a friend because it had separation anxiety. So rather than dealing with the separation anxiety, she went to get the brother, which she didn't get, but she was offered one of 3 other dogs. She took it on as a 7-month-old bitch. Transpired it was a 3-month-old dog. So a few months down the line, it wasn't the small dog she thought it was going to be. It's now Labrador plus size and has behaviours that were way beyond anything that she can cope with. Because she had no support, she got no advice, she didn't want to go back to where the dog came from. Lots of times you can't. So there are people who are having really poor experiences. But equally, there's people who are desperate to have a dog, and they're not necessarily finding those in UK rescues or UK breeders at the moment. So, yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it?
I think it's like everything. If you have the right organisation, the right people, the right structure, and the word's just gone. But they're bringing like yourself. I mean, you guys are the only rescue centre that I'll either recommend for rehoming a dog to, or rehoming a dog from. Because I know the amount of time and effort and patience that is put into getting the dogs just right. And when I see people bringing dogs in from abroad, I think, God, the trauma of the flight, just things like the smell. I mean, even just the smell of the country, let alone the smell of the house.
Everything's different.
The water.
And I think the biggest thing, is that people think love is going to sort this out. And actually, these dogs are not in a place where they want love, are ready for love. They actually want boundaries and security and structure is what they need, which again I appreciate is going to be controversial. But so many dogs just die of love, to be honest, which is it's weird, but they take that, and then what do they do with it? There's no cues for them how to behave in the home or what to do, and things just sort of get out of hand so quickly.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely. It's like when you bring a puppy home, isn't it? The first thing we do is go, "Oh my God, the puppy is amazing," and then we let them do whatever they want, and continue letting them do whatever they want, and just shower them in kisses and cuddles. And yet we've just brought them from a structure of like their litter pack, if you like, where mum has been absolutely
on everything.
really strict. Well, you do that and I'll stick my paw on you. You do that, I'll sort of ace that at you, or you won't remove you from the situation, or if worst case if it's a muscle clamp, and all of this going on, and then we bring them home and just shower them in kisses and cuddles, and
that is so stressful for a dog. It's so, because it does like, well, this, that, here, what should I do? And so if no one says, well, that's great, carry on doing that, but that's a no, they just get more and more and more sort of anxious and excited, and it's not good.
And then the overwhelm tips into something else, isn't it? It's like overexcitement or potential aggression or any of those things. And,
they do,
So what do you think is the future for rescue at the minute in relation to COVID? Are we shutting the doors on the international dogs and being ready for that, like the backlash of the Brits in lockdown, if you like, or do you think there's still a bit of a balance?
There is a balance. I mean, from our point of view, we have not taken in any international dogs directly this year. So in as much as ones that we had scheduled, because there's a lead in time anyway, and we sort of anticipated something from what might be coming our way, we deferred all those dogs because we thought we don't know what's happening. Our dogs come out by land, so they've got to come through a number of countries, and there's a risk of quarantine for the drivers. Plus, arguably there's a risk of sort of transmission of disease from between countries and into the UK. So we took a decision as sort of a management committee that we would not be offering space to international dogs directly ourselves. That said, we are still taking some international dogs where people have got them from other sources and come unstuck. So they're kind of international dogs, but in UK homes. So there are some of those dogs coming through, and again, as I said to you, I think there'll be more. I'm sure there'll be more, and whoever people dogs got to come. So yeah, I think there will be a lot of people looking for help. I mean, I hope they're going for sort of training help and the sort of support that will help them to keep the dog. I mean, all of us in rescue would be like to be out of business, really. I mean, there doesn't need to be so many rescues in the country. I mean, I think, you know, people have learned what a bonus having a dog in your home can be, but there'll be some that just think, well, actually, yeah, it was good during lockdown, but I just don't see how I'm going to make it work going forward.
And it's a big commitment, isn't it? Especially this time of year when we're going into winter. I mean, gosh, when I moved to Scotland, it's the first time I've ever I'd had to walk my dogs in coats. I remember getting up one day and walking the dogs in mine.
It's frosty up there, hasn't it?
Yeah, oh, it's beautiful. I love it. But it's not the light. We've been, you know, I had to get these dogs like really thick parkas. And when I moved up, my vet, who's my friend, said, "Oh, you'll need coats for your dogs." It's like, yeah, right, okay, you know, yeah, okay. I've now got these like big wrap around the neck parkas, because you go out and it might be 1 or 2 degrees or like -1 or 2, but then you look at it and it says feels like -15.
It's wind, isn't it?
So, Sarah, what's the best way of bringing home a rescue dog? I mean, I know I've written about them and I've talked about them a lot, but you know, from an expert yourself, what's the best thing we can do when we invite a rescue dog into our home?
Listen to the people who you've got the dog from. If it's from a reputable rescue, they should be well placed to give you that information about your puppy or your dog. It doesn't matter whether it's, you know, 10 weeks or whether it's 15 years. You know, that they should be able to give. I mean, if they can't give you information, then they jolly well ought to be able to, in my opinion. And look at what's going to take the stress out of things for that dog. So, you know, have that routine. It hasn't got to do everything all at once. You're going to have it for a long time, hopefully. So, no, to get simple things like that, not letting it track you around the house, whether you go from sort of kitchen to bathroom to garden. No, if it's got a place, if there's boundaries, have that routine. Put in lots of exercise, so you know you're draining any sort of anxiety or excitement, but make it productive. It hasn't got to necessarily be tens of miles a day. You can sort of incorporate training in that, so that you know your dog's focusing on you and it's getting to know what you want, and you've got opportunities to reward all of those behaviours. Don't flood it with loads of people. You know, everyone wants to come see the new dog, and like the new dog's going, no. They haven't got a right to go sort of leaping into its space. You know, just be sensitive to what your dog is feeling, and be prepared to be more persistent than your dog is. So some of them would, you know, you ask them to do something and go, "Oh yeah, that's lovely," and others go, "No," and others go, "Absolutely, I'm under no way." So you've got to, like, if that is the rule in the house, then that is the rule. If you want, no, so it becomes sort of non-negotiable, really. So if you, right from the moment you take the lead, that dog is taking information from you and how you live at home. So just be aware that, you know, it's watching you, and you know, that little honeymoon period is exactly that, where it's sussing out how it fits in, what goes, what doesn't go, you know, and like rushing to the front door to greet everybody is probably a no-no in my book, because it really doesn't have that right. It doesn't have the skills to be there. So if you're pulling it back and stop it getting out, one day that's all going to go wrong. So and
not overly mollycoddle them and feel sorry.
No, I don't think so. I think just they'll feel safe if they know, if you make it clear to them in a way that they understand where they fit in with your home. And you know, your rules are your rules. Every dog is different, every family, every circumstance is different. You can't sort of say, well, it definitely should not be doing this, or it should be doing this, because some people's, just the geography of the house or the nature of those people, you know, you have, and that's where I think the skill of the rescue comes in, that you don't put a dog in a home where someone is physically or emotionally unable to meet what that dog needs. There's no good sort of try it and see how you get on. You know, it's got to, you know, everyone has to be as sure as they can be from day one that this is the dog that is going to be right for that home, and commit to that. And don't be scared to come back to your rescue. You know, if things aren't working, there probably are 10 people down the park who can give you 10 versions of what you should feed it, how you should train
On
it.
social media.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, but actually, probably your rescue centre is a really good starting place to go back and get that information, or to point you in the direction of someone who can help you. You know, don't give it a, well, let's see how things are, or my worst phrase I hate most is, it's all right, it's a rescue dog. No, if it's behaving badly, it's not all right, it's a rescue dog. You know, get help before those behaviours become too embedded, or you misread the situation and things go horribly wrong.
Because the one that gets me is like, you'll go out and you'll have like a really, really bad dog, and not all rescue dogs are badly behaved, I'll say that, but you know, the dog will come bounding towards you and they'll go, it's okay, it's a rescue. And you go, oh, when did you rescue it? Oh, 7 years ago.
Yeah.
It's not a rescue anymore. Stop being a rescue for
Your
children.
dog, your dog.
It's your dog, your problem.
That's exactly, it is your dog. When you take it home, it is your dog. You know, you are the keeper of that dog. You have the legal responsibilities of that dog. And, you know, for yourself, for the dog, for your family, for the wider public, you know, you need to know you're doing the right thing, and then your dog will be happy. You know, they're very, very fickle. That's the one thing we say about dogs. Having seen tens of thousands, you know, you do think that no one can look after your dog like you. That, you know, you're the best home. It wouldn't do so well somewhere else. And actually, tens of thousands of dogs prove that statement.
They do, don't they?
All right for them. Don't wave you goodbye. They'll be okay. They'll be okay.
They just, I mean, if they didn't adapt as well as they did, they would have become extinct.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, they are quite selfish, I guess you'd say, in that way. And if you meet their needs, and you know, they'll just sort of, they have their quiet period and work out how things have changed and what the new rules are. And that's why that patience and that consistency is really important. And you know, just getting out and walking with them, training them is such a brilliant way to form that bond and you know, move things forward for everybody.
because I always thought it was, you know, like you grow up and you say, oh, it's a person, it's the hand that feeds the dog that gets the respect and the love, but it really isn't. It's the person that gets out there and does dog things like walk, or when the dog's head migrate, does activities with them or hunt with them, and they're the people that the dog develops that bond with, that trust and bond with, and they're the ones
and respect as well. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, we're using kind of human words about dogs, but that's the easiest way to explain it, isn't it? The dogs don't do very well with confusion and inconsistency. I mean, even if life is a bit tough for some dogs, I mean, take the international dogs on the streets, you know, it's a sort of hand-to-mouth existence, but there is that consistency of the other dogs they're with and how life is, and that is less stressful for them, probably, at that time, because they don't know potentially something bad's going to happen, than putting them in a home where there's loads of kids and, you know, walks are erratic and there's treats all the time, and well, it's just like, oh, well, how am I supposed to cope with this, you know, on my own without any sort of guidance?
Yeah, I think, and you know, just through experience as well, dogs tend to be loyal to a pack and a position in the pack rather than the individual. So as you just said, you know, that could go to a new home, they might still love their old owner, but they're now a member of this pack, and their trust and loyalty and bond is with the new pack leader, if you like.
Yeah. I think that's very true. I mean, when lots of our dogs come back to see us in normal circumstances, I mean, we always welcome visitors and things like dog shows and various events, and you know, people just drop in and see how they're doing, and the dogs are really pleased to see us, and particularly those sort of carers that have had the most input. You know, can see they're pleased to see them, and it's all excitement, but they want to go back to the people that they've been living with. That's their new, and that's how it should be.
Yeah, one of my friends, she has working gun dogs, and her best friend will retire some of the older dogs because they live in kennels. And so my friend has a couple of dogs indoors, and then she has her kennel dogs as well. And then her best friend will take one of the really oldies with her. And you know, when she gets like 11 or 12, and she'll retire and she'll live indoors and lie by the fire and snooze on the sofa and stuff. Then she'll go back and see my friend, and they'll get a cuddle off Jill. And then as soon as Karen opens the car door, it's like, right, I'm off. I'm off to go and lie in front of the fire, forget that kind of stuff. And it's really lovely. Like I couldn't imagine doing it myself, because I'd be like really jealous and heartbroken that my dogs loved somebody else that much. And then you have to say, hang on a minute, you're humanising it.
Yeah.
It's down to leadership, family, pack, and that's the new pack.
All of those things, yeah, really important. It's from my point of view of being in rescue, it's lovely that dogs do have that easy capacity to transfer their loyalty and be really happy. And some of them are even if we've only got our hands on them when they're relatively elderly. If you can give them that happy period of retirement, that some of them may have had 10 or 12 years of life being less than perfect. But if you could just give them, and sometimes a matter of months for some older ones that I've taken on, but at the end, at least they knew, life could be good, and and that makes it, well, it's worth the heartbreak, because you invest in those dogs more, and you want them to go on for ages, but sometimes they just don't.
but it's intrinsic in them that rather than stay in an environment or stay in a pack that isn't working for them, intrinsically they would then move on, or they would be pushed out.
Even packs are very fluid, because dogs get old, have puppies, die, get injured. So that is, I think, innate in the dog, that they are. That's why they read all these signals, isn't it, to see if things are the same, or is there something that maybe they should be adjusting to in some way. Fascinating subject.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing.
Everyone will teach you something new, won't it?
it's just, I've never had a rescue dog. I've taken on a dog, like Spud was 4 months when I got him, but I don't class him as a rescue. He just, the gamekeeper, I didn't want him anymore, so I said, I'll have him. And I know some people would say that was a rescue dog, but to me it wasn't a rescue dog, because there was nothing wrong with the home he was in. He was just, the keeper didn't have time for him anymore. So I said, I'll have him. And so he's the only dog that I've had. Actually, that's not true. I had a puppy going back when I was 17. In the day, back in the day when we were young, Sarah, they used to put puppies to sleep, but they couldn't house train them and stuff, didn't they?
Yeah.
And so this is what happened with Saber. He was a lovely little dog, but the owners couldn't house train him, and so they're going to put him to sleep because he wasn't house trainable. So I said, I'll have him, trained him, and then moved him on when I moved down south. And I can't, for me, not having had my own rescue, but having worked with lots of rescues, I kind of get inside the head. But to listen to somebody like you talking about them, it's just wonderful, because there's that massive insight into like the migration of dogs from pack to pack as well, which is just
I've probably had over 80 myself, in and out of the house over the years. So some from literally the whole of their life, and some just for sort of long or short periods or rehabilitation. And it's not always easy, but it's ever so worthwhile if and as I say, we'd like not to be here and be doing this job, but while there's a need, it's an aspect of dogs that people do get very involved in.
What dogs have you got now? Were they rescue dogs?
They were rescue dogs, yeah. When I lost, so I had collies and springers and shepherd crosses, and then I got to a point in my life, I suppose, when I was sort of more involved in rescue. The kids were sort of growing up and leaving home. But I'm not going to have any dogs. I will foster dogs and rehabilitate dogs, but I won't adopt dogs, as it were, because then I can help more dogs and it can be more flexible and everything. So first one was a Chihuahua, a big Chihuahua, who he was 5 months old, and he'd been in 4 homes, and the last people who had him were in tears at the rescue centre at 7:30 in the morning, saying, take this dog, because he was so aggressive. 5 months, he was like a little weapon. And so yeah, okay, well, you couldn't touch him, you couldn't do anything with him, so I brought him home and still got him. And he is a character. There's no aggression in him. In fact, we use him as a bit of a stooge dog at the rescue centre, because he's got such high energy. It's like we're going to play touch, come do this. And those dogs that sort of don't do that, it's like, well, I don't care, I'm quicker than you, I can do this. And, you know, it's really his job now.
How old is he now?
10 now.
Okay.
10. Yeah, so he stayed, although I never ever saw myself with a small dog, but he's got such a big personality, he's not like having a small dog at all. And the other one is a Romanian dog. So he kind of slipped under the radar, and I don't know what has happened, it doesn't really matter, but we have an arrangement, Nina and I, so we are very happy together, but there is no way that I would place him in any home, because his tolerances are fairly low of quite a few things, but we get on fine. I tell him, he does, we're happy, we have a great time, but
how old is he?
I don't really know, he's probably about 7 or 8 now. He's a cross between sort of like, I don't know, a bit like a Skye Terrier sort of type, sort of that sort of grey, big ears, very pretty, and everyone wants to touch him, like, just don't. He's fine. He's fine. But the people he knows, he loves and he trusts, he's great with other dogs, but he wouldn't want to be like cuddled or picked up or messed around with anyway. So, you know, if he's worried, then, you know, there's he definitely would do things you wouldn't want him to do. So he's here for life as well.
Brilliant. And do you class yourself as their owners or their guardians? Because guardian's a term that's on.
Sorry?
Do you class yourself as their owner or their guardian? Because guardians are the term at the minute, isn't it?
Oh, is it? All right.
Yeah, apparently so.
As far as they're concerned, I'm their guardian angel, because they haven't got any other options. I think they get on very well with each other, which is nice as well. But I bring in sort of fosters. I've sort of had quite a few. So I had a little puppy farm puppy last year. He'd been brought up, I think, somewhere not very nice in Ireland and given to an elderly lady. And he was so traumatised. He'd bitten her very, very badly, and he just stood. He just stood. He just looked at the wall. He didn't move. He didn't do anything.
Oh.
And so in kennels, we had him for a couple of days in kennels, and he just couldn't go near him, or he just was frozen and just was snap and lash out. So I had him back here for a period of time, and he's done really well. And then I have rehomed him to somebody that I've homed another schnauzer to, and I've just had film of him doing dog agility.
Oh wow, that's awesome!
Yeah, so he's really lovely. So so that's Benji. His start was about as bad as it could be, really. But he's taken. When they took him on, I said, no, you've got a year's work ahead of you before he begins to behave like a normal dog. And we're sort of 2/3 of the way through that, I guess, now. And he's now sort of, he's out and about and meeting people, and this lovely film of him doing dog agility, which is wonderful.
God, that's awesome. What a lovely thing to do. I mean, when I do behaviour consults, and you go in and you help solve people's problems out with their dogs that they've kind of caused, but you know what I mean, don't you, through like lack of knowledge or lack of training, and then you help them and you put them right in a short space of time. That's awesome. But generally the dogs that we're going to see aren't dogs that have been moved from pillar to post, or that got real deep issues with them, and you can help them very quickly. But to be able to do something like that for Benji is just, it must make you sing.
I mean, for most people, you'd say that dogs like that don't stand a chance. And, because for a lot of people, they wouldn't know the way forward. But I mean, I think it's particularly true of the puppy farm dogs we see, or dogs that have had a really traumatic experience of some kind. They build mental barriers. It's a survival technique, I think. Whereas they just completely shut down, and they run on the very basic sort of instincts, and your input just bounces off them because they've learned, however they get hurt or abused or starved or whatever it is, they're just running on the very barest of survival. And you just have to go just be, as I say, very patient, but you know, they don't want love, they can't take love. They want, you just have to do things, and then bit by bit by bit, you know, those barriers will come down. They will come down. I mean, I think I spoke to you about my first proper dog, Kelly. She'd been shut in a shed for 7 years. She was a grey and white collie cross, dark grey and white collie cross. When I got her, she didn't have any grey in her coat. She had no sun on her, and all the grey had faded. And she was almost blind because she'd never been in the light. She'd been in a kennel for quite a long period of time when the person who had her died, and they were going to have her put down because they couldn't touch her. So I opened up the back of my car and said, okay, your choice, get in the car or that's it. So she bit me twice, like last chance in the car, and she got in the car. We were throwing bits of Mars bar at her, which was all we had to keep her back because she was so aggressive in the car. Got to the house and she sort of shot out the car into the kitchen and went behind the boiler, and she stayed there for 3 days because she was so agoraphobic. And I had a year where I would take, I could never could put a lead on her. I could lasso her, put her in the car, and we'd go and sit in a field and look at space. And then one day she got out of the car, went round the back of the car, and then got back in the car, and that took a year. And then gradually from there, she got to the point where we could walk and take her out and do things with her. And yeah, she had 7 really happy years, but she was super hard work because she was so reactive. If you got it wrong, then, you know, you got bitten. But yeah, loved her to bits.
It's amazing, isn't it? So we just need to not impose our will on them.
No.
Just let them be.
Yes. And just needed time to see that, you know, there was a world out there. And I mean, she was odd, and then my other dogs didn't really like it because they didn't understand her. But in her own way, she had a really, really sort of happy another 7 years. So it was brilliant.
God, Sarah, I could talk to you all day. I could just keep asking you questions about rescues. It's just, you know, I just want to pick your brain because it's such a fascinating subject of like the whole psychology side of it, and the people's psychology and the dog psychology. And would you come back on the podcast in the new year and tell us what happens after lockdown?
Oh yeah, could that be interesting? If I'm still standing, I will.
Say that again?
If I'm still standing, I will. Yeah, I'd love to.
Oh, brilliant! Thank you, because it'll be really interesting to see what happens.
It will be.
You know, we're going into it's the 3rd of September. If October's the biggie, and then see what happens with all these lockdowns.
Maybe it's not going to be. Maybe there'll be another twist and turn, and who knows? It will be really interesting to see what happens for everybody. So yeah.
Fantastic. Oh, thank you for coming on. I'm going to
stay safe
properly. You stay safe too, and I shall catch up with you again after lockdown and rescues on the other side of lockdown.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you for your time.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.